Baltimore has seen a fair bit of construction over the past few years, with big projects like Harbor Point being built out. But it's also right now littered with stalled construction sites. The big question is, are these delayed construction projects the result of Baltimore specific issues, or is it a bigger set of changes that are coming and a sign of things to come nationwide? In this video, I'm going to break down a dozen or so stalled Baltimore projects and my speculation on what exactly it is that's holding them back. For the first project on this list, we're headed just outside the Baltimore Ravens and Orioles stadiums for a project that was originally called Stadium Square. The original plans were for a multiple building project spanning several South Baltimore blocks. The first apartment building and the first office building were built before the pandemic, but then the pandemic hit. At that point, the next building scheduled to be built was a 75,000 square foot office building. Unfortunately, this project stalled, and since then, the rubble-strewn lots where the next buildings were supposed to go up have seen minimal progress. This definitely appears to be an example of a project where changing demands of the market following the pandemic threw a major monkey wrench into the plans. The site is still located in a desirable place, so it may one day be built out, but with an overall office vacancy rate of around 20% in the city of Baltimore, the project may need to go a different direction from the original planned office space. This seems like a nationwide trend, not just a Baltimore-specific issue, as many major metropolitan areas are still experiencing elevated office vacancy rates and falling office rents 5 years after the pandemic began. Next up, we're headed to Harbor East, one of the ritziest waterfront areas in the city of Baltimore. Just a few blocks back from the water, however, lies the Meyer Seed Company building, which has been in a state of delay and deterioration for a while now. The project was spearheaded by a local developer who grew rapidly, particularly in the pandemic years. As interest rates fell and borrowing became easier, this developer began to take on more and larger projects like this one. This particular one is an old industrial building that was set to be converted into several hundred luxury apartments with 60,000 square feet of ground floor retail. In the last year, however, it seems the developer may have overstretched and is now grappling with numerous issues related to that overreach. The Meyer Seed Company building stalled out, and it's not clear exactly if and when it'll get going again. Some have been quick to criticize the developer, who does bear some of the blame, but at the same time, the over-leveraging was bound to happen in the artificially low interest rate environments that the Fed created several years ago. For the next project, we're going literally right next door to 1400 Aliceanna Street, another stalled Harbor East development, also by the same aforementioned developer. This one has all the hallmarks of the previous project. Recently, it hit the auction block, so hopefully whoever takes over the project can get it restarted and going again. While problematic, situations like these are not limited to Baltimore. The significant upheaval in both the lending markets and the broader real estate market during and after the pandemic led to all kinds of unforeseen changes. My hope is that as we get a few more years removed from the pandemic, these shockwaves will begin to dissipate, and developers with the vision and the means to complete their projects will be able to take over and see these projects through. Now we're headed back over to the stadium area for our next project on the list, the concert venue that was supposed to be known as the Paramount. This one was very clearly derailed by the pandemic. Initial planning for the 4,000-seat indoor concert venue began shortly before it all started in 2019. Needless to say, the original target for a mid-2020 opening was about as bad timing as you could possibly have for a large indoor concert venue. Despite the fact that the world closed down and indoor gathering places were particularly out of favor, the development team pressed on. The opening date was pushed back a year and then 2 years. Then sometime along the line, the Paramount's name got changed to the Austin. At this point, the developers were still targeting a 2023 opening, but 2023 came and went, and progress would eventually stop. Today in 2025, an incomplete shell of a building hasn't seen any progress in several years. It's begun to show signs of this too. Construction fences are falling over, weeds are taking over, and graffiti has begun to pop up on the partially completed building. This building is in an area that the city's been targeting to become the so-called Warner Street Entertainment District, so many are hopeful that a new team will take over the project and get it back in gear. But like some of the other ones on this list, this is very clearly a project that probably looked great in 2019 and then looked terrible in 2020. This one can't really be blamed on Baltimore, but larger nationwide issues. Another project going on right now is the Penn Station redevelopment. It's Baltimore's largest train station and is actually inside the top 10 busiest in the United States. But over the years, it's started to show its age. A large-scale renovation project was planned that would include redeveloping much of the area around the station, as well as giving the station itself a facelift. Some progress was made, but last summer it was announced that parts of the project would be delayed. This one appears to just be hitting the standard delays that large infrastructure projects hit, particularly ones that have to coordinate financing between federal, state, and local. Given the importance of the station as a transportation hub connecting to all the largest East Coast cities, I do expect this one to get back on track and eventually finished. It might just take a little longer than initially expected. The Poppleton redevelopment. This original plan started way back during the Martin O'Malley days when he was the mayor of the city of Baltimore. The plan was to redevelop parts of West Baltimore near downtown. A developer was selected. It just so happened to be a developer from out of town who had no experience doing this type of large-scale project, and the project began. And by began, I mean there was generous tax incentives that were assembled. From there, the developer was given control of hundreds of properties in the neighborhood. Many local residents opposed the project, fearing that their neighborhood would be demolished and replaced with an unaffordable redevelopment. They were pretty much spot on, with one exception. The demolitions did take place, and much of the old neighborhood is now gone. In the years since, though, there's only actually been one two-building apartment complex built. The rest of the development has gone nowhere. Entire blocks sit vacant, where the neighborhood once stood. The luxury apartment has been through half a dozen management agencies since it was built about a decade ago, and local journalists have been reporting on ongoing problems within the complex. Just east of these luxury apartments lies the now abandoned Poe Homes housing complex, just what everybody wants to see out their window when paying a premium apartment rent. In mid-2024, the city finally terminated its deal with the developer after 20 years of underperformance. Now the future of this area isn't clear. Hopefully the residents who weren't pushed out can rebuild some semblance of a community, but with all the damage that's been done through this development project, it's going to be an uphill battle to do so. To wrap up the list, I'm going to look at 3 currently stalled projects all at once because they share a lot of very similar Baltimore-specific problems. All 3 are near downtown Baltimore, an area that's struggled with many of the well-known Baltimore problems. Coordinating the financing and redevelopment of a $50+ million project is hard enough, even under the best of circumstances. And downtown Baltimore, unfortunately, as much as I like the city, is hardly the best of circumstances. In some cases, some areas may not currently support the rents that would be required to make these projects financially viable. In others, public safety, local taxes, and regulation have been seen as an impediment to progress. Another issue that's uniquely shared between these 3 projects has been figuring out how to handle the historic angle and preservation issues. Unfortunately, these 3 projects have dragged on so long that these historical issues may be largely a moot point by the time they're finally built out. In the case of the Mayfair Theater, it's a 100-year-old theater that closed in 1986 and hasn't been used since. Fire and a partial collapse led to the demolition of the entire building except for the historic facade. The upcoming development plan seemed to call for this facade to be incorporated in the design, but it'll definitely add a level of complexity that other projects typically don't have to face. For the Mechanic Theater, we have another historic theater. This one was a little bit newer brutalist style building that many people hated, but some people found unique. There was some debate about if it should be saved and if it was historic enough to protect. Ultimately, the decision was made to demolish. Despite getting past this hurdle with the historical angle, this project unfortunately hasn't moved forward since and has been a rubble-strewn hole in the ground in downtown Baltimore ever since. Like the Mayfair Theater, the Hendler Creamery was another building about 100 years old that was seen as being historical enough to save. Unfortunately, with this project, there were enough delays that the project dragged on, and eventually the decision was made, like the previous Mayfair project, to tear down the whole building and just keep the historic facade. Although, in the years since, the project's dragged on even more, and eventually the decision was made to tear down the whole thing. So after all that time and effort spent on analyzing the historic element of this project, it eventually won't come into play as it's an empty lot now. So to wrap it all up, construction and development in Baltimore is a mixed bag right now. There have been some projects that I've highlighted in other videos that have been highly successful. Others have been less so. There are some underway that are dealing with temporary setbacks and others that may be facing larger structural issues. Only time will tell for sure how all these end up working out.